Good evening and welcome to News Center Maine's first Voice of the Voter candidate debate of 2026. I'm Rob Caldwell with Phil Hirschkorn, the host of Political Brew on News Center Maine, and we are coming to you from Aura in Portland.
So for the next 90 minutes, you'll hear from all 7 Republican candidates for governor who are on the June 9th primary ballot. Early voting is underway, by the way, in the state of Maine. And let me introduce you to them from left to right on the stage. Jonathan Bush, Bobby Charles, David Jones, Garrett Mason, Owen McCarthy, Ben Midgley, and Robert Wessels. That was in alphabetical order to help us. Thank you all for being here. Rob?
We're going to be asking the questions this evening with a focus on solutions to some of the many challenges that the next governor of Maine is going to face. The Maine State Chamber of Commerce is our partner in this debate, and we appreciate its support. It invited some guests to watch, and we also should note that the Chamber recently, just a few days ago, issued a new report called Maine Economic Vision 2035, which helped us frame some of our questions. Let's get started. We're going to begin with the opening statements. Each candidate will have 60 seconds, and we will lead off with Jonathan Bush.
Thanks, guys. Hello, everyone. I'm Jonathan Bush. I'm a father of 7 and a husband. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a veteran. And for the last 30 years, I've been a CEO. Maine clearly needs to reduce taxes, shred crazy laws, and shrink Augusta. My opponents, I think you'll see, largely agree with me. But we need to decide who best to accomplish that. I believe we need an outsider to Augusta who is an accomplished CEO versus an insider or a lobbyist or politician. Starting as a platoon leader in the Army, leading people on a mission is all I have ever done. Getting the mission clear to everyone, shredding the distractions, bringing in the best people, removing the weak links, and relentlessly motivating the team. Maine's government is poorly led right now. It makes a mockery of work ethic, personal responsibility, and fairness. By contrast, my leadership in Maine is well established. Over 1,000 Mainers have made their lives in jobs I created. It separates me from the lobbyists I'm running against, and it's why I'm here tonight to earn your vote.
Bobby Charles.
Good afternoon, friends. I grew up in rural Maine, and I live in rural Maine. I built a life around service, hard work, and fulfilling the mission. As a father, lifetime conservative, naval intelligence officer, investigator, businessman, and former assistant secretary of state, my life has been about leading. What I say I will do, I do. My life has also been saved many times. Micah 6:8 says, "What does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." I have a vision for Maine, a state that is content, hardworking, business-friendly, prosperous, normal again. To get there, we must be bold. Deep cuts in taxes and regulations and energy costs, drug traffickers and illegals, return schools to parents, get trades and moral compass back. We must end the abomination of woke. No boys in girls' bathrooms or sports. We must prosecute fraud, restore predictability, livability, and integrity. As governor, I will complete that mission. And thank you, President Trump, for sending J.D. Vance here.
David Jones.
Sure thing. My name is David Jones, and I will tell you, I have, is it on? Can I start over? Perfect.
Go ahead, start over.
All right, yes. All right, there we go. Sorry about that. My name is David Jones. I started my company when I was 17 years old. I took it from me and a couple of guys to about 1,100 people on my payroll. I've been married to my wife, Nancy, for 41 years. I have 6 children, 3 boys, 3 girls. I have 8 grandchildren, 4 boys, 4 girls. So the Jones family is definitely fair and balanced. We've got our mission cut out in front of us. We need a CEO. I am the outsider. I'm the only Trump guy on the stage who's stood by President Trump since day one. I voted for him in 16, 20, and 24. Right? I had dinner with Charlie Kirk about a few months back, about a week before he passed away. And he invited me out to Colorado. I spent the weekend with him, and I asked him why. Why is it you chose me out of all these people in the room to be there? And the answer was, I think you're the real deal. So I'm standing here because a lot of people think I'm the real deal. I will work hard and diligently to make Maine everything it absolutely can be.
Garrett Mason.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you both for having us tonight. and for everybody who made this debate possible. My name is Garrett Mason. I am a husband, father, small business owner, former state legislator, lifelong Mainer, and I'd like the opportunity to be your governor. Tonight, you will hear from some of my opponents that they have been CEOs of large nationwide and international companies. I don't begrudge them for that. It's a tremendous asset, and I congratulate them on their success. However, my business experience is much more like the many Mainers who are at home. I feel the impact of Augusta's bad decisions more directly than a CEO looking at a spreadsheet. As small business owners, we understand what others might not. Your employees are extensions of your own family, and you don't let your family go without. We don't just sponsor the T-ball team, we coach it. I've been fighting legislative battles right alongside Maine business owners for almost 20 years. It's why I have a lifetime Mary rating of 87% given by the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. My name's Garrett Mason, and I would appreciate your vote on June 9th.
Owen McCarthy.
My name is Owen McCarthy. I'm a proud native of Patton, Maine. I grew up in the shadow of Mount Katahdin on a trailer in my grandfather's land, the son of a third-generation logger and a second-generation lunch lady. I had a great path. I was the first in my family to go to college on the Pulp and Paper Scholarship, where I studied engineering and learned how to solve problems. I then went and worked in the heritage industries of paper. From there, I became an entrepreneur. I've started multiple companies. The most recent one, MedRhythms, helps people improve walking following stroke. We raised $60 million of capital into the state, created great paying jobs. I'm also a husband and a father. I have two sons, Oliver and Theodore, and I don't think that they have the same opportunity I had coming from Maine here today. I don't think if you're a working class Mainer, like many of you watching, it's affordable to live here, and this is 100% because of policy decisions. I released a plan and a vision, Maine 2040, to accomplish that and go after that. 70 pages, 130 policies. I think we owe it to all of us to build a better state.
Ben Midgley.
All right, thank you. I will start with what I am not. I am not a politician or a bureaucrat of any kind. I'm from outside of that world. I'm running for governor to bring strong common sense values and principles back to the governor's office. That's the mission. I grew up here in Maine. My wife grew up here. Our three kids grew up here. Went to the same high school I attended. One is still in high school. I never made it out of college. I tried. I couldn't afford it after a few years. I've spent time on unemployment and food stamps. Started cleaning machines in the fitness industry, and after 30 years of working in that industry, I became the president of a company called Planet Fitness. I left there, started another company as chief executive officer and founding partner called Crunch Fitness Franchising, and over 15 years, I built that to the #1 fitness franchise in the country. I had 500 locations in 46 states, 6 countries. I had 3 million members, over $1 billion in revenue, and I created 15,000 jobs nationwide building that company. I strongly believe that the next governor of the state should be a seasoned and experienced chief executive officer, of which I am. I will show up every day to get us back to where we need to be. Thank you.
And Robert Wessels.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Robert Wessels. I'm a lifelong Republican, a political outsider, a family man, a business leader, and just a regular, everyday Mainer looking to make a difference. Like most of you, I feel the pain of skyrocketing electricity bills, crushing property tax, and schools that spend more and deliver less. In 2022, I finally hit the point where I couldn't take it any longer, and I said somebody needs to do something about this, and I launched my campaign nearly 3 years ago. Our government in Augusta has grown out of control. Businesses are drowning in regulations, we have massive overspending, and families have less freedom and more government overreach than ever. We are chasing businesses and families out of our amazing state, and this is not sustainable. As your next governor, I will shrink Maine's bureaucracy, cut wasteful spending, find the fraud, and bring accountability back to the government.
Thank you all for those opening statements. Quick word about the format this evening. Each of the candidates will have up to 60 seconds to answer questions. Less time for questions that can be answered more succinctly. There's a countdown clock which everybody can see, so they'll have a sense of the time. Phil and I will ask follow-up questions when appropriate, and we'll keep things moving for a fair, lively, and informative conversation. And with that, let's get to the first question. Phil, you're up.
Thanks, Rob. We're going to start with taxes and spending. Every Republican candidate on this stage, I'm sure, wants to lower taxes. We've heard you talk about that this entire campaign. So please tell us specifically, what is your plan to cut state income taxes, And how much do you figure people would save under your plan? Bobby Charles, let's go to you first.
To me first, sure. So I will eliminate the income tax in 4 years. And people say it can't be done, so I've gone around and taken a survey of people who've been there and who've done this kind of thing, looked at the other states, and I'll tell you why it can be done and needs to be done. This budget has grown $6.44 billion under Mills, 77% increase since fiscal 18 to 26. That is an unsustainable, we use the word unsustainable. It's actually more than unsustainable. It's reckless. It has crashed this economy. The reason we see no growth, the reason businesses are leaving at 300 and 400 a year, the reason small businesses are going out of business, the reason we're suffering is because of these taxes and because of this excess spending. So it's very methodical. Over a 4-year block, phased in, using all of the 800-page budget we've already got, we literally start redlining things up front. I will use the line item veto. We will use every tool in our basket to get taxes down, and then we're going to turn simultaneously to property taxes.
David Jones?
Well, my plan is to eliminate property tax, right, on primary physical residence. I want to raise the homestead exemption to $500,000, and I want to fund the schools with the money that I'm going to save with the audit that I know I have to do. I'm going to create what's called DOGE, David's Office of Government Efficiency. And I think there's about $1.5 billion to $2 billion in wasteful spending. We went from $7.5 billion to $12 billion. That's about $4.5 billion increase in cost of living. Should have taken it probably to about $9 billion. So I think we have about $3 billion to work with, some essential, some non-essential, I don't know. I don't think what we have here is a revenue problem. I think what we have here is a spending problem. Now, a lot of the things that they spent our money for are not things that you or I, as normal Mainers, would want to see happen. So I think with my DOGE, with the David's Office of Government Efficiency, we will audit, we will find the essential and get rid of the non-essential, and we will reallocate those dollars to the towns to make up the shortfall that the towns will suffer as a result of cutting the property taxes.
Garrett Mason?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I'm the only person on this stage who's actually made measurable progress in reduction of the income tax. In 2011, the first order of business when we got into the legislature was to do just that, and we did. We removed 70,000 people off the tax rolls entirely, and we brought the marginal tax rate for every person in this state down. We did that through ending fraud, waste, and abuse. We cut all over the state government. There was a general cut of about 4% in that year, and we were able to pass those savings down to the taxpayer. That's the approach that I would take. That's a far cry from what things like Bobby Charles are offering. You know, Bobby Charles has been going around the state saying he's going to cut $4 billion, and the other day I heard about $5 billion from the state budget. I have 4 members of the Legislative Appropriations Committee, both past and present, who I asked and said, what would happen if you cut $4 or $5 billion out of the budget? And the answer was unanimous. It would tank the state economy. And that's why I have 45 state legislators, both present and former, who have endorsed my campaign, because they know that the leadership I will provide will be steady, realistic, and we will get the job done just like I did before.
We'll come back to you, Bobby, to respond to that, but let's keep going. Owen McCarthy.
Well, thanks, Phil. We're in a world today where talent can move around anywhere that they want to be. 8 states have no income tax. It's soon to be 11 or 12, and other states are considering it. I think we're in a different moment in time. So in my plan on page 14, we talk about making a 10% cut to income tax immediately for working class Mainers that make under $200,000, and then phasing it out over eight years. And some people come to me and they say, Owen, well, how can you afford to do that? And I said, in this setting we're in, how can we afford not to do that? The ways we figure out, because right now income tax is about 42% of the budget. The ways we figure out how to solve for that, one is the Maine Performance Review, which is an audit of everything, particularly the fraud, and when we find the dollars, we give it back to the people. 2 is we need to grow the economy. Right now, in the plan, I talk about creating 50,000 foundational jobs that sell things across border. That would double last year's GDP. You do that, you make it up with corporate tax, not the tax rate. And then finally, you got to be efficient as you go forward. And then you merge all this together, you can cut the income tax in 8 years.
Ben Midgley?
Yeah, so the state is one of the highest tax states in the country with one of the lowest average incomes. And when you look at the effective tax cuts, when you cut taxes, like was done in 2011 and 2015, the state actually makes more income. So it behooves all of us to lower taxes. When you have more money in your pocket and corporations have more money in your pocket, they spend more, so state revenue goes up. My focus is on the overall tax burden, not one tax in particular. We have too many: income tax, sales tax, property tax, excise tax, corporate tax, millionaires tax. There isn't a tax that the state doesn't like. So the thing you have to do is start to lower the spending, which has gone out of control. 200 years to get to a $7 billion budget, only 7 more years to get to a $12 billion budget. That's $5 billion of taxpayer money that's been taken. So you got to reverse that. The majority of the budget, 77% of the budget, is in the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Education. The biggest drain on the budget right now is our welfare system. Now, I've been on it. You got to give folks a path off it, and it's good for folks that need it, but you've got to create a bridge so folks can get off of that and get back into the workforce.
And Robert Wessels?
Maine is the 4th highest state with the tax burden. And I hate property tax. To me, property taxes, it's like you're renting your property from the government, and I'm not okay with that. I will be working to cut $2 billion from the budget in the first budget cycle and use that savings to put towards a homestead exemption. This is a short-term, again, it's a short-term plan. Ultimately, I want to use that homestead exemption to create immediate relief, but then my long-term goal is to get rid of property tax altogether on Maine residents, primary resident. Then we begin to turn our attention to the income tax and begin lowering that once we have our property tax figured out and under control.
Bobby Charles, I want to give you a
Actually,
chance.
we need to give Jonathan Bush a chance.
Oh, I apologize.
Robert has it at 4th highest, depends on how you calculate it. I have it at 3rd highest, just up from 5th highest last month. Nice job, Augusta. This is for the 5th poorest state in the country. It's no wonder we are 49th out of 50 states for economic growth. It's no wonder working families are being suffocated by the fixed cost of their towns, their property tax. The mission for this first tax cut has to be one thing: Maine is open for business. We're tired of being a no-fly zone. We're ready to be open again. I believe the way to do that is a $2,000 per family income tax cut, $1 billion out of the budget. That can allow us, that'll start to bring back businesses. You don't need the whole $1 billion out of savings because you're going to start to wake up the economy, bring people back to the state, keep businesses in the state, bring good jobs for Maine. That will bring down property tax loads as more people have jobs in towns. I know what this is like. I've done this already in Maine, in Waldo County, where we built 1,000 jobs. It separates me from lobbyists who maybe, you know, Bobby, with respect, hasn't run anything in a very long time except for a small lobbying firm. 25 of the last 27 years as a lobbyist. It's easy to make big promises if you haven't delivered. I'm quite sure I know how to deliver that number.
And by the way, your plan, which you announced on tax day, that's a 25% tax cut for
It's
everyone?
about 25%, but you don't need it all out of spending because you can then bring some revenue back into the state.
Bobby, I want to give you a chance to respond to what Garrett Mason said, but I also want to preface that with the information we have from the Department of Administrative and Financial Services is that 55% of the general fund of general revenue in Maine comes from income taxes. So when you and Owen and some others talk about zeroing it out, that's a lot of revenue that you would zero out, but please pick it up from there.
So I'm going to do a double rebuttal here with Jonathan as well. Let me start by saying 43% is the number that I see coming from income tax right now.
That's the individual and personal.
That
The
is,
rest is
I am
corporate.
talking about the individual income tax.
Okay.
That's what I'm not talking about corporate. Right now, we are in an environment where you've seen an uptick. Now, think with some imagination here, as well as, I mean, I've got a graduate degree in economics. I've run a company for 25 years. I ran a multi-billion-dollar operation and downsized it at the same time they were putting more and more mission on us. It is a very doable act. In fact, instead of being incremental, it's death by 1,000 cuts to the average citizen. You have got to cut income taxes deeply over 4 years. I'd like to eliminate them. You've got to cut property taxes by rolling back all of these mandates. But we are currently in an environment, think about this, where we're looking at $6.44 billion more than just 7 years ago. It is unsustainable. As everybody, I think, on this stage would tell you, it is unsustainable. We absolutely must go after this. And then you've got to think in macroecon terms, and it's simple. When you cut income taxes, you leave about $5,000 per person back in the people's pockets. The multiplier effect is 16. Instead of buying a piece of a bureaucrat, you buy everything that a farm owner or anybody else, business owner or individual person goes out and buys. The sales taxes don't have to come up because sales revenue goes up, so you get growth. And then everybody on this stage, I think, believes that growth is the fundamental. We need to rethink everything, and that means putting a growth task force together and making it real.
All right, I know David Jones and Garrett both want to respond. David, go first.
All right, the clock isn't working, by the way.
Right.
So I just want to call that out. The budget went from $7.5 billion to $12 billion. So the simple math is 4.5
fiscal year.
I don't know what you're looking at, but everything I'm saying is 12 and change. So maybe we have a disagreement there. But the idea that you can eliminate the income tax, I just don't see it. If I can shave the $2 billion off of the ridiculous spending that I've seen and looked into, then we can definitely get rid of the property tax on primary physical residence, and then we have an incremental decrease in income tax. But to eliminate the income tax in totality, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Garrett Mason.
Yeah, I mean, I guess all I say in response to that is it's all well and good. I mean, I can stand up here and say I'm going to eliminate $6 billion, $7 billion, and just clickbait the heck out of it. But the fact of the matter is, if you can't get even Republican legislators to join you in that budget quest, Bobby, you can't get it done. And so what you need to do is you need to actually go ahead and do reasonable cuts that can lower the income tax. If Paul LePage could only bring the marginal tax rate down 1.15%, I don't see how you're able to do that in 4 years.
All right, let's get to this. All right, I'm going to jump in. Let's get to the specifics on spending cuts. You all, to some degree or another, favor cuts in spending for state government. So give us specifics, and let's start with you, David Jones.
Well, right off the bat, we got to look at DHHS, right? We've got a big problem there. Are these clocks working? The clock's not working, by the way.
Obviously, it's not now. We'll see if we can get them activated.
Perfect.
We'll go with a rough idea of how long everyone has.
DHHS is a big problem. And you look at the Maine care system. We've got 409,000 people. Now, what I'm told, and from what I'm finding out, there might be as many as 6,000 illegal immigrants on that as well. That's a boatload of money, considering it ends up costing us about $40,000 per pop. So, you look at that, that's a simple thing. Then you look at, we have 1,500 jobs, right, that are unfunded, but standing there as a slush fund and unfilled. That's $200 million that the Democrats have sitting as a slush fund that they can tap anytime they want. So we really got to, look, we got to lift the hood up. We got to really do a deep dive, and we have to find out if, and Garrett's right, we have to get the House and Senate to work in conjunction with whatever the governor wants to do.
We're going to give all the candidates a shot at this. Garrett Mason, specific spending cuts.
So one of the big things David just said was untapped positions. That is a huge concern. There's about 2,000 of those. That number has grown significantly since I left the legislature in 2018. We did a nice callback of that, and it saved a lot of money. I also would do everything that I can to repeal the Medicaid expansion that happened in 2018, I think. That's a huge piece of money. We also have a guidebook given to us, believe it or not, by Matt Dunlap. He issued a 300-plus page audit of the state government, of which there is no bid contracts. There is all of this stuff in there, including the $27 million in improper autism payments that we're being asked to pay back to the federal government. That doesn't include the state money, by the way. So there's all kinds of places. Everything that I just listed there is well over half a billion dollars, encroaching on $1 billion.
And just on the income tax cut, this is why I want to do it over 8 years, because there's a lot of things that have to come into play to make that happen. On the spending cut specifically, one is the first move is you got to go after the fraud that's out there, right? The Maine Wire's been able to identify some fraud without a lot of data. If you're the governor, you have all the data, you have the same tools. If you can identify 5 or 10x more and then stop the flow of that and send it back to the people, there's some savings there. 2, we talk about the Maine Care program. I talk to small business owners all over this state, and they say, I have employees that will only work 20 hours. They work any more than that, then they lose their benefits. We need to fly to DC, work with the Trump administration, make sure that we can get a waiver so if they work a little more, they can get 80% of the benefits, 60% of the benefits. Step off of that. It's a win-win, an incentive such that we both save money in the budget and people get better off. These positions that are open, we need to close them, and then each position, they need to come to the governor and make the case. I know it's a little micromanaging, but we've spent a lot more, $3 billion more than inflation the last 7 years. That's just a few things. We can go all day about this. I know the clock's not working, so I'll stop.
Yeah, apologies for that. Ben Midgley, where would you make specific cuts in state spending?
Sure, I'm gonna work in reverse a little bit, build up to the biggest expense. So one thing a lot of folks don't know about is the Treasury cash pool. We're holding far more cash than we actually need. We should be able to disperse that back to people. You could have an immediate tax break right there. The fraud oversight in the state, my estimation is there's probably hundreds of millions of dollars there. We've been far too lax on that, and we are spending 3 to 5 times as much for certain services that we shouldn't spend on, that other states are spending the more appropriate levels. The procurement system, the failed audits, obviously there's going to be lots of money to save in there. When you're not going out for best bids, you're not saving Mainers as much as you could. Zero-based budgeting, it was mentioned over here. You have to go back to that so you don't have automatic increases in state spending for different departments each year. And then 77% of the budget is between DHHS and the Department of Education. So if you're going to go for the biggest savings, you have to go for the biggest pool. So if 80% of your budget is combined in 2 departments, that's where you go. And I've talked about this many times. You've got to provide a bridge for folks so they can get off the system. Maine doesn't allow folks off the system.
Robert Wessels.
Yeah, so we need the positions, unfilled positions we already talked about. We need to do a hiring freeze, and we need to block those unfilled positions. That will give us about $200 million to work with. We also need to create work requirements for anybody receiving Maine Care and end government help for non-citizens. We need to put photo IDs on EBT cards and make no-bid contracts the rare exception that they should be. We also need to downsize the Maine Department of Education. And now when I'm referring to that, I'm referring to the bureaucracy, not defunding our schools. We need to stop donating to NGOs with taxpayer money. That is not the government's job. And then we need to find and remove the fraud from DHHS. But let me point out in my last 15 seconds here that everything that you're hearing from here, great ideas, absolutely wonderful, none of it will get done without a Republican House and a Republican Senate majority. And so my campaign has been focused and working intensely on elevating the House of Representatives and Senate candidates so we can win the majority. We've worked with 28 other campaigns because that is a priority.
All right, Jonathan Bush.
Well, obviously the biggest spend in Maine state government is healthcare. It's also the biggest expansion over this administration. $5 billion being run by bureaucrats in Augusta who think they're the national healthcare system of the UK or whatever. Tons of fraud coming out in the press. Bad providers getting allowed to tap in and keep getting paid. The mission here, and most importantly there, the Maine care system has crowded out the commercial, actually driven up the cost of commercial systems by suffocating small businesses and creating monopoly pricing power in the last remaining hospital system. We need to expand healthcare options in Maine, which will bring down the cost for everyone. The other thing we need, in order to do that, we need to shred the eligibility of Maine Care back to people who need it, not everybody. We need to get rid of this incredible direct contracting racket going on, get rid of certificate of need law that prevents doctors from being able to build lower cost operations. And then there's lots we can build back, but I won't go into it in the time. This is what I do. I manage $30 billion of healthcare payments in this country with zero fraud and 100% transparency. I can bring the providers that currently don't come to Maine back to the state, which will bring down both state costs and commercial market costs as well.
Okay, Bobby Charles.
Yeah, so I'm going to come right back to my $4 billion income tax cut and property tax cuts. Everything begins with spending cuts. $6.44 billion is beyond where we were just 7 years ago. We're going to cut all the funding for illegal. I'm going to give you specifics.
Exactly where would you cut $4 billion out of the budget?
Here we go. We're going to start right off. Matt Dunlop has given us $2.1 billion in sole source, non-compete, fraudulent contracts given to friends and family. We're going to start there. Then we're going to cut all the funding to illegal alien housing, EBT cards, and Maine Care for these illegal aliens, 8,000 of them. Then we're going to work very specifically on opening up all the books. We have $46 million in just one program in one larger program at DHHS. DHHS is not only unaccountable, it wastes money right, left, and center. We are going to focus on opening the books, digging in, Steve Robinson suggests it may be $500 million, but in the dark of the night, it could be just like Minnesota. We're going to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. I am a former federal investigator for 5 years. We are going to dig in. We're going to turn it upside down. We're going to eliminate it. And I'm also going to tell you about my firm.
All right,
I
we're going to stop.
literally
We're
have
going
put
to
out
have to leave you there.
my job as a company,
Sorry,
just quickly,
sorry, no.
this was a rebuttal. My job as a company, nutshell, was to put out of business drug traffickers and terrorists around the world, every quadrant of the globe. And that's what I did, Jonathan.
I just want to follow up on MaineCare numbers. Mr. Charles, you said 8,000. Mr. Jones, you said 6,000 illegal immigrants on MaineCare.
This is what he does. He
But that's
embellishes everything he
1.5%
says.
of the enrollment. And Garrett Mason, you said you would roll back MaineCare expansion. That was 100,000 people. Are you suggesting you would cut 100,000 people from MaineCare?
That would be the goal. I mean, listen, having
Based on what criteria?
Well, listen, having 400,000 people on MaineCare is not a laudable goal. It is a death spiral to ridiculous health insurance costs. I opposed it back then. It is no secret that I worked very hard to make sure that that referendum did not pass. It should not come to any surprise that I would want to see it rolled back. That is 100% a Republican principle and something that I fought for in the 128th legislature, and I'm sure that everybody on stage would join me in that effort. So that is...
Sure. Just one more thing on homestead tax, in case our audience doesn't know. That's the amount you're allowed to deduct, the homestead exemption, from your appraisal when you're assessed with your property tax. Mr. Jones said 500,000, he would raise it. Mr. Wessel said he would raise it to 300,000. It's only 25,000 now. Do the rest of you have a specific number in mind? Because that's the key way to cut property taxes as governor. Anybody? Just your number, quickly.
No, I think we've got to keep it simple. Simple beats smart, 7 days a week. And all the little programs and exemptions and yeses to all the little groups doesn't get heard in the economy as we're open for business again. We need to make the tax code really, really rock-dumb digestible. And each time somebody offers something to some other group, they make it less penetrable, and we're less open for business.
Does anyone have a homestead exemption?
I do have a very specific one. Look, as a guy who studied tax law, we can, for seniors, we can quadruple the exemption for seniors and for first-time homebuyers so that people who are young in this state will stay in this state because they can afford to stay in the state. It'll also bring rents down.
Rob, you have another question?
We've talked a bit about spending, and I'm not sure that we've gotten really the numbers that add up in the cuts that you're talking about. For instance, if you take off the non-citizens from MaineCare, that's about 8,000 people, and there are about 400,000 on MaineCare. So you're talking a small fraction. Even if you were to take every one of them away, you're not getting close to the billions of dollars that you need to save.
1.5% of the enrollment.
Let me tell you what the answer to that is. Anybody between the ages, as President Trump has already said, 18 and 65, without children, not disabled, able to work, you don't get MaineCare. That's Garrett's 100,000. You don't get MaineCare unless you work 20 hours a week in a real job, volunteer, and it's got to be authenticated, or you go to school, which is a win-win, and we begin to restart the engine of Maine.
Owen McCarthy.
Also outside the box on this, I do have spending cuts, which I laid out where they are. But if in 8 years, our economy is growing at double the GDP, and you look at New Hampshire as a comparable, a lot of their mix is corporate tax because they have a much stronger business environment. We have a stronger business environment that's growing. That will make up a delta. Also, if we strive to flatline the budget, compound interest on all the other lines will catch up. And so it's a cut, it's a grow the economy, and it's make sure that we're efficient with that top line. And then you can replace the income tax with a mix of things. So you can't, it's just not one thing. You got to do multiple things at once to make this work.
All right, Garrett Mason, then we'll get to Ben Midgley.
So I think we're a little off track here. Well, I just wanted to address one thing, and maybe this can help wrap it up. So Robert mentioned one thing about we can't do any of these things if we don't have a Republican legislature. Listen, I would love to live the good old days of 2010 when I was there and we had a Republican trifecta. And I'm going to work every single day to try to make that happen. But here's the reality, and this is what makes me different than anybody on the stage. You know how we reduced income taxes? We did it with Democrats. You know how we reduced fraud, waste, and abuse? We did it with Democrats. You know how we did it? We did it with 2/3 budgets signed by Governor LePage. So what we have to do is we have to have somebody in the office who understands the role of governor both politically and with the bully pulpit, because we can get these things done. I'm going to fight for a Republican legislature every single day. But even if we don't, we have to have somebody with the experience to go through and navigate that and get it done anyways, and I can do that.
Ben Midgley, as briefly as you can, please.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to point out is, I'm not pegging a specific number in terms of reductions, but if you look at the amount of folks that are on welfare in the state of Maine and how they're stuck in that because they're not allowed to work and make enough income, then they lose their benefits. The average income for benefit level for a welfare recipient in the state of Maine is $40,000 in benefits. That's the average income in the state of Maine. So you have to reduce that by giving people the opportunity to go out and make more money. I've talked to plenty of people around the state. For example, there's one person's making $16 an hour, 20 hours a week at McDonald's, and they won't take extra hours or promotions because they're going to lose their health care benefits and all the other benefits. So there's a lot of people in Maine making that calculation right now, and until you turn that system around, it's going to be hard to lower all the spending that we have in the state.
All right, we're going to take a break now. We're going to continue our conversation with the 7 candidates in just a moment. We'll be hitting on we'll be hitting on housing, and we'll be hitting on childcare and other issues. That's all coming up right after this break. Governor in the primary on June 9th. We're going to get back to lots more questions for them, and Phil has got all the off for this segment.
We're going to turn to some affordability topics in just a moment, such as housing and childcare. But just to button up our conversation on taxes and spending, would any of you consider raising more revenue from tourists? For example, we have a meals tax, now 8%. We have a lodging tax, now 9%. Some people, given the Iran war, are also talking about suspending the 30-cent a gallon Maine state gas tax. I think, Garrett, it's your turn to go first. Would you want to take that? Yes or no? We could go down the line. It's a short answer.
I'll be honest with you. I never signed myself up in some of these pledges that force people into how we're going to raise revenue. I'm not a libertarian. I'm very much a conservative Republican. I believe you have to have some element of taxes. I believe what the problem is in Maine is we are taxing everything. And you have a great case study, right next door to New Hampshire. They don't have a sales tax. They don't have an income tax. And their property taxes are about the same as Maine, maybe a little higher. We are taxing everything that we can possibly tax. So any chance that I get to remove the burden from Maine people paying taxes, I'm going to do. And my first focus on that is going to be to reduce spending as much as possible, and then we'll be able to return that money back to the people. So, in answer to your question, that's a whole big budget conversation. I do believe you need revenue in the government. I'm open to looking at that.
But we've heard the Democrats maybe talk more about taxing tourists.
The thing is, I'm not a Democrat, so you can ask them about that.
But anyone here think raising the meals and lodging tax is a good idea? If you all say no, we can move on.
No, I mean, my Uncle Thumb says everything's gone up but wages in this state. I don't think that makes sense to do that. I do think a temporary suspension of the gas tax would be something to do. I also think that the way to raise money from tourists is to build customs at the Portland Jetport to get international flights here and get more tourists in here and more volume of them. And there's airlines that want to come here. We just need customs, so we should do that.
Okay.
I just want to add, the problem, as I see it, and maybe it distinguishes me from others on this stage, is that we are radically overspending. It's not that we're not taxing too much, it's that we're spending too much. And that's why deep spending cuts in the waste, fraud, and abuse, but in the programs we don't need. I want to get rid of net energy. All of the rest of these burdensome taxes we need to get rid of. Just leave the money in the hands of the people who make it instead of redistributing it to people that don't deserve it.
Okay, Rob has the next question.
Let's move on to housing, which...
On order, I want to say this. There's no tax that David Jones has ever been in favor of. And I do not want to see any more taxes increase in the state of Maine.
Thank
ever.
you, David.
Let's move on to housing affordability, which
don't have a-
in
we
much
don't
of the
have a
state...
revenue
All right,
program,
okay.
spending program.
Let's move on. Housing affordability, which in much of the state has become a genuine crisis. Here in Cumberland County, it was just announced by the Maine Association of Realtors this week, the median price of a home is $590,000. So there are a lot of people who can't afford to buy, they can't afford to rent, they are really being squeezed. Our question, and this one goes first to Owen McCarthy, is what specific steps would you take as governor to accelerate the construction of new housing?
Well, to me, the housing has gone from the American dream to just a dream in the state of Maine. By my calculations today, and that doesn't include growth, we're 42,000 homes short. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. In my plan, we talk about 4 things to do.
One or two specific steps you take to accelerate.
Well, I got
construction.
43 seconds, so I could fit them all in
All right,
43 seconds. Okay. So at the state level, any lot that gets divided by 3 right now, DEP and DOT gets involved. Let's loosen it up. Let's take that up to 9. At the local level, like New Hampshire did, allow for third-party review for towns if someone wants to pay for it. So there's timelines and consistency when you go out for your permitting and other things. You should do that. When I was in Caribou, someone said, "Owen, I can get you as many permits as you want. I just can't get a plumber." So we need to make sure that we invest in workforce in the trades, and so the CTE programs need more slots. And finally, innovation. It's hard to build custom modular. We need zones where it's easier to do that.
Okay, Ben Midgley, same question. Specific steps to accelerate construction of housing.
Sure. Well, you need a targeted multi-level development plan because there are builders who will build in all price points of the market. So you can have $100,000 homes to, multi-million-dollar homes. You can have unused buildings, single-family, multi-family apartments, mobile homes, efficiency homes, prefabricated. So you have to engage the builders, but to do that, you have to let them build. One of the challenges we have now is our permitting issue. So you have to institute a 60-day expedited permitting rule for the Department of Environmental Protections, and you also have to allow for outside consultant review because they don't have enough people to get those permits through. You do the same thing for the Department of Transportation because traffic studies can take a long time. You limit discretionary reviews overall, so if a project meets the rules, it gets approved. And even states that are very liberal like Maine, California, and Oregon are already doing that. They're ahead of us on that. You can have public-private partnerships, like the state of Massachusetts does something called the Community Preservation Act, where there's a joint investment for infrastructure. It gets builders out the gate quicker, and then you raise local taxes through, they get tax revenue and states get tax revenue. You can work on the Maine Uniform Building Code, get developer feedback there so they can reduce the overhead. The regulations added to our building right now is adding 20 to 30% on costs. I'm past my time, so I'll stop there.
Robert Wessels.
One of the benefits that I've had in traveling the state for 3 years is the thousands of conversations that I've had. One of those conversations recently, somebody was telling me about a construction guy who's working on a contractor was working on a project, and he's just recently spent $40,000 in fees to his local and state for a particular project. Again, and then we're wondering why these houses are costing more. I was also talking to somebody who was in the middle, quote unquote, of a project that they were 2 years into and they still had not even broken ground. Again, it comes down to simplifying and expediting permitting and getting rid of regulations. Right now, we are killing our construction industry by over-regulating and the DEP process and stuff like that. We need to simplify that and we need to expedite it. We need to fast track housing permits, and I was talking to somebody who was saying, talking about the sprinkler regulations and the our insulation regulations. Again, we are killing our housing industry by over-regulating and inflating prices in our houses.
Jonathan Bush.
God, I love the housing issue. It's like a greatest hits album of crazy Democrat ideology. You got the social justice movement in there. You got the environmental justice movement in there. You've got coastal millionaires who hire a beautiful lobbyist to work it out with the town council. You got people who are close to the list. I got 43 seconds. I'm getting there.
Okay, but we don't...
Well, I want to point out that working people are getting suffocated. I'm setting the stage. Now you'll hear the plan. The plan to make it possible for regular people to afford housing is to increase supply. We shred the sprinkler requirements, the insulation rules, the dozens of grant and loan programs so we can bring back builders, reduce permit times, delegate permitting to the private sector instead of these poor souls in Augusta. Healthcare is a lot like this. I spent my whole career helping lots and lots of small businesses survive bureaucracy. That's exactly what's got to happen to the building community in Maine. They've got to have a layer that makes it easy for them to prosper rather than hide on this or that person's list.
I'm going to ask one follow-up. Have you ever talked to one fire chief, anyone from the fire marshal's office, who is in favor of reducing sprinkler standards in homes?
I have spoken to many who say, look, I'm a fire chief, I got to be for the sprinklers. I also have done the math, and 95% of Mainers live in buildings without sprinklers, but 85% of permits are held up because we're doing sprinkler virtue instead of housing affordability.
All right, we'll move on. Bobby Charles?
So I have 7 solutions, but I want to articulate the problem plainly. Seniors who have worked their whole lives and are on fixed incomes, talked with one today, cannot stay in their homes. In fact, I was talking to Dave's daughter. She markets to these people. It is a very difficult environment. And first-time home buyers, because property taxes are so high, cannot get into this market. So one of the first things right off the bat is, again, property tax exemptions for seniors and for first-time home buyers for 5 years. 64% of Maine households cannot buy a median income home. And I'm going to blame the Democrats for this. Nobody on this stage. We need 80,000 housing units in 10 years. And the Democrats have said, no, we just need to build public housing, 500 units. Wrong. Here's the answers. Roll back the mandates on property taxes, cut the income tax. A lot of people don't like it, but that's what I want to do. Permitting and zoning needs to be those barriers rolled back, put the trades back in schools, enhance workforce training, stop the quality housing being given to illegal aliens, and incentivize factory build, prefab modular homes. You do those 7 things, Maine is on a good track for housing affordability.
David Jones.
Well, this is my wheelhouse. I've built tens of thousands of homes. I'm the only guy on this stage that's ever done what I've done. I've built high-rises, malls, shopping centers. You know what? When I did that, the government worked in conjunction with me. They weren't working against me. So we have 135,000 regulations in the state of Maine. Every one of those regulations costs consumers, builders, costs them money. Bottom line, we have to eliminate the regulations. If we don't do this, it's, you know, those regulations, they add about between $80,000 and $120,000 per single family home. That's insane. So what we have to do is we've got to simplify the process. I'm a true believer in landowners' rights. Here in the state of Maine, I can't tell you the battles I've had with towns, talking with these people, especially in the town of Falmouth where I live. It's amazing. So they got all these rules by all these ideologues, and they're standing there telling me, who's built more homes than anybody could ever imagine, what I need to do to build a home on a piece of property. It has to stop, and I'm a KISS guy. Keep it simple, stupid. And if we don't do it, we're in trouble.
Garrett Mason.
I wish you gave me 1 minute and 30 seconds because I'd like to follow up on your question, but let me just answer one thing. I don't think it's enough to just say we're going to build more housing. We have to look at the entire housing picture, and that also means capital. There are many people like me. I'm 40 years old. My wife and I locked in a good rate when in 2020 when we bought the house that I grew up in, right? But it's time to move on. We'd like to move on, but I'm not giving up that 3.25% interest rate. What we need to do, and one of the first things I'll do as governor, is make sure that I bring in the banks and the credit unions to start implementing, if you've ever read your mortgage, this is already in there, saleable and portable mortgages. It's already in there. Most of the mortgages that you sign, that's already in there. And we have a very effective example, and it's called a VA home loan. You, as somebody who is not a veteran, can assume a low-interest home loan. We need to do that for Maine people. That is a very important piece. We can't just build our way out of it. We have to look at the whole thing altogether. Rob, you asked, is there any fire chiefs who are against sprinklers? Yes, there are. We've had multiple bills in the legislature over the past 16 years that I've been there, and they are split on this issue. But I would also say this, on fire alarms, there is state statute, not rules, that say that you have to have fire alarms in apartment buildings in the hallway. That's a really dangerous idea. You want to know why? Because every single time that you burn your toast in your apartment, the entire building gets dumped out, and it costs way more to do.
I'm going to stop you there. We're very familiar with that. It happens in our news building.
See, there you go.
Pretty regularly.
I'm just trying to help you, man. I'm just trying to help you.
We're going to move to another topic. Phil.
Did Owen get the answer?
I did. I started.
Yes.
I could go again.
Sorry,
if you
I'm
want.
losing track. So many candidates. Our next topic is childcare, and I guess we'll start with Ben Midgley. Everybody knows it's a huge cost for families. Some liken it to a second mortgage. There are a lot of people or a parent quits a job because so much of the income is going to daycare or childcare. I guess the question I want to zero in on is specifically what you might offer parents to help pay less for childcare.
Sure. I mean, just another additional stat on that. I mean, right now in Maine, we're keeping about 18,000 people out of the workforce because it's so hard for them to find childcare. We've gone from 1,000 plus childcares, small childcares in 2015 to under 650 today. So that makes it very hard on parents. And like you said, the cost can be as much as a mortgage. we've got too much regulation on that, so you got to add, reduce the regulation and allow more daycares to open, make it easier on them. The state had something called the Child Care Affordability Program. It just doesn't do quite enough to help parents, so I think to get more access to child care and make it more affordable for families, you can expand the use of Section 125, which is like pre-tax dollars like health savings accounts and things like that. You could actually have a fully deductible tax credit for corporations that want to pay for child care for their employees. And I would be fine expanding the tax deductible aspect of child care to a 75 or 100% reduction for individuals as well. That way, they can go out, spend that, get a dollar for dollar reduction, and it's going to be a rounding error on the budget. So,
Mr. Wessels?
Yeah, so this is not going to surprise you, right? Childcare is businesses. And we've already talked about the fact that Maine is hard on businesses. We are not business friendly. And so we are chasing childcare as well as other businesses out of the state. People are shutting down and saying, I can't continue to exist because of regulations. It is overregulated, just like every single other industry, and taxation. The other part with childcare that doesn't necessarily impact all businesses is DHHS, okay? That impacts our childcare facilities. And there is a toxic culture within DHHS that absolutely must be turned around. That culture is a culture of retaliation. That culture is a culture of protectionism and protecting their own, not the children. And so we have to get in there. We have to fix DHHS. We need new leadership who does not accept this toxic culture. This culture within DHHS is it's keeping people from being willing to open a child care or making them close their child care because it's just not worth putting up with.
Thank you. Mr. Bush?
There is a subtext when we hear about childcare affordability in these debates, which is that maybe the state should take it over because we've done such a marvelous job with our union monopoly of education and our takeover of MaineCare, which drove up the cost by 20% per person, et cetera, creating monopolies. And I just call baloney on the pretext that when something becomes expensive, the way to fix it is for the state to take it over and start trying to run it better. It's just a false premise. What we need to do is make it possible for families and child care providers to make their own deals. In Maine, if you want to take care of 4 children in your house, you get an application that is 250 pages long. You get multiple in-person inspections per year. The regime that you must go through to be subjected to do that is crazy. In Waldo County, employees of Athena Health afforded health care because they were doing well at good jobs. We need to grow our economy, but we also need to shred this woke looking down on families and child care providers making their own arrangements so that more people can choose more options reasonably.
Thank you. Mr. Charles?
Yeah, so I think if you think about this, you have to ask yourself, how do I put my mind's eye in the place of parents and child care providers? And I'll say there are 8 things I would do right off the bat. I would adopt the New Hampshire version of child care costs. It's a third of the cost and 2 or 3 times the quality. I would disassemble DHHS. As Robert said, it is a disgrace. They are retaliatory against everybody from, I talk often with Betsy Grant and some of these others. They are, and as Jonathan said, it's overregulated to the nines, but it's also mismanaged. DHS has to be taken apart. It's one of the 2 big expenses of this state. Investigators need to be real, and they need to be investigating DHHS. What else? We need to literally, I know these things all seem like they blend together, and one of the report elements here is alignment and coordination, so you create a virtuous cycle. We do need more jobs. We do need lower taxes. We do need the lower healthcare costs, which I think we can all speak to. We do need to be able to get back to the idea that energy costs are also low. If you track the virtuous cycle instead of the vicious cycle, the Democrats have put us on a wicked vicious cycle. We need to go back to the virtuous cycle of lower taxes, lower regulations, pro-growth, pro-family, pro-childcare in the private sector. That's the way it always worked. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We know what the wheel looks like. We need to stop driving on squares.
We need to move on. David Jones.
Well, I own F.O. Bailey Real Estate, and we've sold a few daycare centers and set them up. My daughter, Lauren, is the daycare genius. But, I'll tell you this. I got a phone call not too long ago from Betsy Grant. She was in tears. She was crying. They were shutting her down. The retaliation by DHHS on this poor woman. I couldn't believe it. It was compelling. And I thought, all she wants to do is take care of somebody's children so they can work. And the DHHS is getting in the way. And the papers that they wrote up on this poor gal, the things they fined her for. I mean, I'm telling you, it goes on. I witnessed it. I drove all the way up to Trenton, Maine to see it myself. I met with her. I talked with her. And it's wrong. So we've got to get rid of how DHHS oversees daycare because they put so many burdensome rules on these people, it makes it near impossible for them to exist in business. And we know if you're a working parent, you're a young couple today, both parents must work in order to make ends meet because we are all in economic prison. We have to free ourselves, and we got to make sure DHS is stopped from doing what they've been doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I continued on, I'd be a little bit repetitive of some of the stuff that we've heard, but I think a couple of differences maybe or other topics on this issue. I think one of the reasons why I think I'd make a good governor is because I've lived through some of this stuff myself. You know, I have a 6-year-old daughter. Daycare was a huge burden for me and my wife before she went to school. It's expensive, and the burdensome regulations on providers are extreme. Listen, I just put up something on my Facebook page the other day. It was an article from CNN, believe it or not. But it's a bill that Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, who's a Democrat from Washington State, I believe, found out that if you want to cut fresh fruit, you're supposed to have a commercial kitchen license in order to get reimbursed through DHHS. That's insane. That's insane. It shouldn't be easier to give your kids Cheetos than a banana. I mean, it's ridiculous. So it's stuff like that that I think we're all talking about here. But one specific financial thing I would consider is maybe we can make daycare fees above the line on payroll so that you can pay before you have to pay taxes on it. Some sort of tax credit I think we can do. But it's the affordability agenda, guys. If you make everything more affordable down the line, things get cheaper and you can afford these things again.
We got to stop little tiny side hustle programs for each little thing that we're in pain on. I don't agree with the idea of creating a special little tax thing for the special little group. That's what we've got now. Our boat is drowning in barnacles. We got to scrape them off, clean up the boat so it goes through the water without all of this drag. Every time somebody wants to help somebody in politics in Maine,
we need to give Owen McCarthy the final word because he hasn't had a chance to address this yet.
And I agree with this tax deduction, this little program as Jonathan provided, because I eventually want to get rid of the income tax. So it's going to go away in 8 years when the income tax is gone in the state of Maine. I come into this with a perspective of someone that was the only one here with roots north of Augusta, and I've been in the business community in southern Maine. I have 2 kids, a 5 and a 3-year-old. I know these are regional problems. These are regional problems because, and they're corporate problems because I know the Aroostook Partnership up in Aroostook County and the Portland Chamber of Commerce both have childcare at the top. And so what to do about it? One is the rule book to be a childcare provider, and yes, we need safety, is thicker than my 70-page plan that everyone already says is too thick. And so we need to make sure that is slimmer. 2 is we're going to expand that deduction, but also I've heard from childcare providers the state doesn't pay them on time. They're floating tens of thousands of dollars. You can't do that as a small business. We need to pay people on time. We need to then work with the corporations that want to solve this problem because they're motivated to keep people in the workplace to figure out how they can regionally help on this problem, and it's a private market solution that will help out with this.
The state is now subsidizing child care providers about $200 to now $500 per worker per month. Would all of you continue that? Would any of you end that?
Oh, I think we need to wean every program that we've got. Once we bring down the affordability so that the strike price of affordable health care comes down by $200 or $300, we can cut back the spending on these programs and the need to know an insider to get in on these programs. You know, this is another example of what we're doing around the edges because we've got a weak core to our economy. As we strengthen the core of our economy, each one of these programs can fall away without people getting left out in the cold.
You know, I know this is supposed to be a debate that distinguishes us, but there's also things that unify us, and what Jonathan just said and what others have said here is absolutely right. If you get affordability back, taxes down, regs down, you don't need subsidies for everything on God's green earth. You need to get out of that business.
And economic growth up. This is a state that's at 0% economic growth.
What about subsidizing?
This goes back to where we say it. Government is not the answer. Government is the problem. Bottom line.
We just have a couple minutes left in this block. What about the state subsidizing free community college tuition for Maine high school graduates. Of course, it's not free because taxpayers pay
bucket.
for it,
Same
but
thing.
it's popular, and the chamber informs us that it has led to a rise in employment in construction, in nursing, and in shipbuilding. Would you continue that?
Every state agency will say that if you give me your money, I'll spend it wisely, and it works. And I hear this in the Democrat debates. That program works. Yeah, compared to what? What if you had left it in the hands of a resourceful Mainer, that money? You sure it would have worked better than what they would have done with it? This idea of co-opting training by employers, they offered me, when I brought 1,000 jobs to Maine, they offered me, would you like our training program, this state training? I said, please, God, no. Let me train my own people my own
We
way.
want concise answers to this question of whether you would continue or eliminate the tuition-free community college program for students.
Very specifically, cost-benefit analysis and zero-based budgeting on everything is required. On community college, it's not open and shut. We're funding out-of-staters that come in. When you have people getting free community college, they don't go to the University of Maine with a paid investment in their future. Same thing with Bowdoin, Colby Bates. I took out $250,000 in loans to go to Dartmouth, Oxford, and Columbia. I paid every penny back, and I wouldn't do it any other way because I invested in myself.
All right, let's move on. David Jones?
Bottom line, the answer to your question is no way I am against the free college. You know, I think if somebody wants to go to college, they have to have some skin in the game. You know, like if you really want to go, then you should pay for it. And there are programs and there's Pell Grants and things that you can do that'll help you out along the way. But the bottom line is we need vocational training. I need plumbers. I need electricians. I need carpenters. I need people that can weld. I need air conditioning and heating guys. We're not teaching our kids any trades. They can't change a tire on a car, for God's sake. I mean, so, you know, the idea that they're going to go to college to learn what they should have been learning in high school, I'm sorry. And you want to go to college, foot the bill.
All right, Garrett Mason?
I got two things I need to respond to. I need to push back on Jonathan a little bit. Tax leverage and tax advantage accounts are something that wealthy people have access to all the time. That's 529s, that's the Trump accounts, that's 401ks, simple IRAs. Like, tax advantage accounts are not nibbling around the edges. They're real solutions for people. So do you want to get rid of tax advantage accounts?
I think the less
including for
little
529
gamification-
in education.
Listen, we have a crisis of insiderism in Maine. The less insider insight people you need to know in order to succeed in Maine doesn't matter to us. We can call a lawyer right away.
I don't think
but if you're on the
insidership
bottom
is an
three
Alphonse
layers of the
grant for
economic
$500.
ladder,
I don't
you
think that's
cannot
true.
play the game in Maine. And not everybody can afford your lobbying firm. You've got to make this so that regular
you
people.
could.
Well, I could. I would.
There you go.
You're great. I'm not against lobbying. I'm just saying the job of the governor is to make this game of life, of the American dream, playable by regular people who aren't connected.
So giving them access
We do
to
need
tax
to
advantage
give the three remaining candidates who haven't weighed in on this briefly, please. Owen McCarthy.
Well, so the regular working class people are the ones that I think about every single day. They're the ones I grew up with. I do think with the community college program, we need to reform it a little bit so that people have to stay here and there's skin in the game to get them through. I also think that while my plan doesn't grow government spending, I do think new programs sometimes are okay. For example, workers that get displaced by artificial intelligence in the fourth industrial revolution for no fault of their own remind me of the people I grew up with during the third industrial revolution when their mills were shuttered and they were thrown to the wolves by free trade agreements that, and I hate to say it, were signed and supported by Bushes.
All right, Ben Midgley?
No rebuttal for a Bush?
No, well, because we
Not
haven't
another
heard from
Bush.
these two gentlemen. So Ben Midgley, quickly, please.
Yeah. So the data you mentioned earlier, it's not solid yet. You know, that's still forming. Takes a while to get that. I've talked to a lot of parents that are both in favor and against that. Certainly can't be for outside of the state folks. You can't do that. That has to be something that, if it was to stay, would be a benefit just for Maine families and Maine kids. It's not really that expensive of a budget line item, but you have to have a significant return on that. So I just need to see more data to see if it's truly
Robert
worth keeping.
Wessels.
Yeah, so I'm not in favor of it. However, I do think, again, we have an issue with our trades in the state. And so this is one way to be able to do that. I'm not suggesting we do it. I'm saying we can attack that in a different way. Why don't we have a private partnership with businesses and who say, hey, we're going to, you know, I own XYZ company. I'm going to go ahead and pay for you to go to community college, and you'll come work for us for 2 years afterwards. We can think through this without just throwing taxpayer money at stuff.
Okay, we're going to take one more quick break. We will be back with the 7 Republican candidates for governor right after this. We are back at our News Center Maine Voice of the Voter debate with the 7 Republican candidates who hope to be their party's nominee for governor in the June primary. We've covered a lot of territory. Let's get to something that's a little bit different. This is a scenario that I'm going to put before each of you, and that is that if you are the governor of Maine and someone who wants to expand a business comes to you with a proposition, says, I've narrowed it down. I'm either going to expand my business with 500 new good-paying jobs in either New Hampshire, no sales tax, no income tax, or in Maine. I might put it in Portsmouth, I might put it in Kittery, I might put it in North Conway, New Hampshire, or I might put it in Freiburg, Maine. I haven't decided yet. How would you persuade that business owner to locate his business and expand his business in Maine? Robert Wessels.
So everything in my platform is working to do that, because the reality is I had a conversation with a senior manager at a healthcare facility. We had a wonderful conversation for an entire hour, and at the end I said, all right, you're governor for a day, what would you do? And he talked about hiring, and he said, when people come to me and they look, I'm trying to hire them, they look and they say education, property taxes, energy, housing, no thanks, and they throw Maine out. Again, same idea, same concept. We as a state are in competition with every other state, and so we must address these things. We must address our energy prices. We must address our housing prices. We must address our taxation.
Is that what you would say to a business person, is say we must address these? Or would you have a pitch that you would make to get them to come here?
At this point, right, there is no competition between Maine and New Hampshire. He's going to choose New Hampshire. My conversation would be talking about, I would be showing all of the positive things that we've done. Hopefully this is 3.5 years into my term, and we'd be able to show all the progress that we made and be able to win them over.
All right, Jonathan Bush, what would your pitch be to this prospective business person?
I'm so glad you asked. This is all I've been doing for the last 20 years. You fly them in, you meet them at the end of the jetway, and you wrap them up, and you take them on a tour, and you introduce them to novel places that are doing exactly what they want in an incredible way. You have on Zoom in the limo, every member, every commissioner, every member of your cabinet taking notes. How was that? What do you need? You then take them back to an amazing dinner here in Portland. And when they get back on that plane, there is a contract in their hand. I have done this countless times, bringing hospitals, medical groups, all kinds of people to Maine, walking them through, showing them the grit, the hilarity, the flexibility, the marvelousness of my fellow Mainers, and signing them up to be here, to move their back office to Maine. And so help me, that is what I am going to do every morning, noon, and night for 8 years when I'm elected.
Bobby Charles, what would your pitch be?
Yeah, so first let me say, I am already talking to companies that would potentially bring small modular nuclear in here, cross-laminate timber in here, processing plants. I would simply take you and sit you down and say there's only one Maine, and Maine under a Republican will be predictable, livable, affordable, and you will have a government that you can work with. And we will be working with the federal government as well to make your life easier. How do you do that? Tax incentives in your sector. We're going to put tax incentives in all kinds of sectors that don't have them now. We're going to have quality of life elevation in the terms of everything we've already talked about here today. We're going to lower our energy costs by 30 or 40%. That's going to make your life easier than it is in New Hampshire. We're going to lower property taxes, be competitive. We're going to lower income taxes, and in 4 years, get them as close to zero as we can. We're going to roll back regs so that you, in this state, net, doing a cost benefit between us and the other 9 states that currently have it and the 2 that are thinking about phasing out income tax, you're going to look at Maine and you're going to go, you know, they got better lobster, they got better potatoes, they got better quality of life. I want to live there. And it's affordable and predictable now. That's what it'll be. I want a state that's content, affordable, predictable, safe. No drug traffickers. Safe.
David Jones.
Well, instead of picking them up in a limo, why don't we pick them up in a beater pickup truck and let them know that there's no money on the table, but that we will do everything we can to eliminate the regulations that are in the way of whatever business it is that they have. We have to make sure that these regulations are gone and that they're permanent. It can't be the pendulum of politics.
What would your pitch be to the business person?
My pitch would be, hey, all right, listen, you want to move that company here? What is it you want to do? What regulations are in your way? How can we help you in that way? Our taxpayer dollars I'm sorry, you know, this, if the taxpayer votes for it and they want to help them, great, maybe we'll do that. But the bottom line is it's not mine to give. But as governor, I can help eliminate the obstacles that will be in the way of them and their businesses to make sure that they live here, stay here for a long time. The problem we have is this pendulum of politics. It keeps changing. A Republican gets elected, then the Democrat gets elected, and the law changes. It has to be permanent, it has to be consistent, and if it's not, they will not come. And energy is that's the number one obstacle.
Garrett Mason.
I think my question would be, where is that business coming from? Because I have always said, and when I ran in 2018 and even today, I think Maine's governor has to be an ambassador to the world on why Maine is the greatest place to live, work, raise a family, and do business. My goal as governor is I don't want to rearrange deck chairs on any kind of sinking ship, right? Like I don't want it to be the choice between New Hampshire, Maine, whatever. I want to go get businesses from other countries and get them to come and expand in Maine. That's growing the economic pie for not only us, but for America as well. And I guarantee you that Maine can compete on regulation and taxes when you go to some of these socialist countries around the world. That's where we need to be competing. I'll give you an example. There was a company in Woodstock, New Brunswick, about a half hour, not even a half hour away from the Maine border. When the tariffs came in, they went out and said, you know, I'm going to shut my business down or sell it to my employees. Maine used to have a Maine Canadian ombudsman that would go and solicit to companies just like that. Guess what? Janet Mills never filled the job. Fired the guy that Paul LePage had and never filled it. We could have had that business here, but guess where they went? Texas.
Owen McCarthy.
So I brought $60 million of capital in this state, and as governor, I strive to be the CEO and chief business officer, so I'm really excited about this question. To make the pitch, I need to know the industry. So let's assume it's in the maritime industry. In the maritime industry, you lean on the history. You say, Maine has been building boats since the British liked our pine trees. So we have a deep history here. The people are trained to do it. Then you look at what we have for trained people. We have Bath Iron Works, we have Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, we have all of the suppliers. That shows there's talent here. That also shows that there's suppliers here. Then you say, like, look, the middle of the country, you can't compete with us because they don't have a coastline. We have the 4th largest coastline. We are, if you go over the world, closer to Asia, as close nearby Asia than Los Angeles is, and it's really convenient from that perspective. Number 4, we have Susan Collins, who's chair of appropriations. We get her office involved in this conversation. And 5, we make sure that we pre-permit zones. So in that area, in that industry, we know what they want and we can move it really fast. And then we create 5,000 or 10,000 jobs in the maritime industry.
Ben Midgley.
Yeah, so I've done business in 46 states. Like I said, created 15,000 jobs. So I know when you work in a state that's friendly to business, how much easier that is. And when you work in a state that is not friendly to business, how hard that is. So the problem we have is just the state that we're in, right? And we do not welcome investment. You have to be a state that welcomes investment. So when it comes to getting people to work here, the most effective thing in selling is trust, right? You're not selling a bag of goods. You're being honest with people and telling them what you're going to do. The governor obviously has to be out in front of that. You have to explain to them that Maine is working to be the most business-friendly state in the country. You can provide incentives for businesses to show here. You can tell them we are moving towards regulatory predictability. You can tell them we are working to become a much lower electricity cost state. We are working to fix the welfare system so you're not working against the state for your workforce. We are trying to drive pricing down for housing. So we're going to open that up and we're going to do everything to set you up for success that we possibly can. And we will be a trusted partner for you.
Another topic, although it is related to what we've been talking about.
Well, given the rise in our electricity rates, which many people attribute to the increased price of imported natural gas is 44% of electricity generation in Maine, would you support further development of renewable sources of energy instead of our reliance on fossil fuels? And I forget whose turn it is. I think
Jonathan
it's Mr. Bush.
Oh, good. Energy. Utilities in Maine are the most incredible revolving door of lobbyists and insiders conspiring to drive up rates, all in the name of virtue signaling. Insiders win when bureaucrats control this system, and it's got to stop. The mission has to be only one thing, another chance to narrow our mission. Maximize availability and maximize affordability of energy and electricity. That's it. That means the renewable energy requirements go out the door into the shredder. Wind and solar subsidies go into the shredder. This entire environmental virtue signaling at working people's expense must go. Virtue signal away, but on your own dime and time. Then we streamline permitting, invite nuclear, small modular nuclear, go get the 2 gas lines that we've not fought for so that our supply doesn't run out in the middle of every winter, spiking electrical rates. This is a thing that we must do urgently. No one running has the ability to beat back intense bureaucracy like me, because that's what I had to do to help small businesses survive in healthcare. And I am ready to go to war to get our energy costs down and our supply up in Maine.
Mr. Charles, renewables, yes or no?
So I'm going to answer in a way that'll surprise people. I believe that wood and biomass have an extraordinary future in this state. We're the most forested state. Democrats don't consider them a renewable under many laws. I think we need to go back to common sense. I will say I grew up in a home with no electric heat. We cut 4 or 5 cord of wood every fall 2 years ahead. Worked just fine. We're probably warmer than most people. Second thing is hydro. We need to not only keep the Sappi Mill in place and all those dams, God bless, that'll be the first, I might be the very first executive order I sign, but we need to uncap hydro. Hydro is a favorable energy source. We get 6 or 10% now, we could get a lot more. And then there are basically 10 points that I will put in the next 40 seconds. This omnibus energy bill that I will put forward, Jim Lebrecht is leading my team with Jerry Chesay. I've sat down with the head of CMP as well as the vice president. We will make this happen. Number one, we get rid of net energy billing. As everybody I think up here thinks, solar and wind subsidies make no sense. We will get an engineer, an accountant, and a utility expert on the PUC, get the hacks off there, no more politics in energy, restore competition so they're competing to drive our bills down 30 or 40%. Streamline permitting, complete the construction of the Iroquois pipeline, and more importantly, the Constitution pipeline, using President Trump to leverage to get the Massachusetts governor to do their job. Again, hydro.
All right, time's up. We're going to move on. David Jones.
Well, it looks like I got 18 seconds, but okay. All right, carry on. All right, go see the website.
That's the overtime.
Yeah. How you doing? Yeah, so renewable energy. I'm absolutely against solar and wind. I want to eliminate the net energy billing. We didn't ask for it. We shouldn't have it. It was just laid on our bill. Every month you get your electric bill. Our electric bills have gone up 115%. All right, 36% in the past 14 months. It's crazy what's happening out there. So we have to have the natural gas pipeline increased. We got to have, that's the simplest and fastest way to bring more power. I'm all for small modular nuclear reactors. Other states are looking at this. It has to happen. We have to have affordable energy. You know, we talk about all these things that have to happen here in the state of Maine. What we want to see happen, it all comes down to energy. Every single thing we talked about here tonight, it all boils down to businesses coming here, people being able to afford to stay here, making sure that it's affordable to stay in the state of Maine. Energy. So we just have to work towards that goal. Small modular nuclear devices and increase the pipeline. We must do it right away.
Mr. Mason?
I am not for covering our farmland with solar panels shipped in from China for very expensive electricity that we then pass off to people who can't afford their childcare. I'm not for that. I am for the all of the above energy approach, the cheapest possible thing. And for the hard left-wingers who are going to claim this is, climate disaster and all of this, Maine is net negative on carbon. Like we absorb more carbon than we put out into the atmosphere. So that should make everybody feel better on that side of the argument. But in regards to energy overall, we need somebody who actually understands the structure. When Janet Mills went through COVID, she brought everybody to court about executive orders and what the limits of her executive power were. What that unveiled is that you can declare a climate emergency. And I think that having some of the highest energy bills in the country is a climate emergency. That's what I will do on day one. We need to expand natural gas, have a ramp for nuclear. But one more thing. Bobby mentioned that he's going to put different people on the PUC commission. Those are 6-year terms adopted by the governor. You will not be able to do a majority on that until 2029. So you have to, and listen, I served with Phil Bartlett. Phil Bartlett's not getting off the PUC commission.
All right, we're going to jump in because we're running out of time. Owen McCarthy.
Yeah, so I was talking to a lady in Island Falls, Maine, who's paying $700 a month on fixed income for electricity bills right now. And those are the people that we need to think about making this more affordable for. We have grown the fastest in the country last year and the last 7 years total. If you look at the market, it's a $2.5 billion electricity market. 250 million of that is solar subsidies right now. There's another 200 million of fees on top of that. These are all fees that were passed by the legislature and around the budget process, put on the generators, and they're hidden from the average everyday working class Mainer out there. We need to make sure that doesn't happen anymore. Move those fees into the budget and eliminate them as much as possible would be the first step. Number two is the solar panels are intermittent. They don't work in the winter that well. Snow covers them. The sun doesn't hit them well. So we need to look for base layer energy. That's either go build, expand the diameter of the Algonquin pipeline for natural gas in, buy more hydro from Canada, explore small modular nuclear, build in biomass. We need to do all of those things. And finally, people or policy. We need to make sure there's engineers and lawyers, and I'm sorry I said lawyers, but lawyers, because they need, there's an intense topic that understand energy, involved in the cabinet to make sure that this happens that's worked in the industry.
Mr. Midgley?
Yeah, you can't go as deep as you need to on this subject in a minute, but in terms of renewables, I mean, I'm fine with renewables as long as they don't do it on the backs of Maine ratepayers. I mean, it's terrible what's happened. These companies were guaranteed profitability in the state of Maine, which people in the state don't know, and they were guaranteed profitability by these extra fees that everyone's talking about are being put on their backs. You've got $200 million a year that we're paying in stranded costs for this connection from the solar panels to the grid. We're paying 30 cents a kilowatt hour when the median electricity in the country is 15 cents a kilowatt hour. You've got this public policy charge that is putting businesses out of business in the state of Maine. It's killing the industries. Lumbar Hardwoods, that company was in business for 74 years. And they had to close because their public policy charge was going from $20,000 to $40,000. 22 hardworking Mainers lost their jobs, and there's stories about that all over the state. And by the way, that also then affects our forestry industry because you can't process the wood. You can get story after story like this that goes in different directions, and it all comes back to allowing Mainers to subsidize solar and wind.
So my electricity bill has gone from $168 to $350 in the last 2 years. And again, that story I've heard all over the state. We must be focused on cheap, reliable energy, and we're not currently. Again, the, I guess, benefit, if you will, is they've already said so many of the things, right? I'm absolutely against net energy billing. We need to repeal that. We need to expand hydro, again, especially with the one with the Sappi Dam, and keep that from getting shut down. We need to expand natural gas, and I'm for small modular reactors. Well, the one thing that hasn't been brought up yet is I was having a great conversation with a Democrat representative not too long ago, and we were talking about renewables and the benefits, and he immediately started going, but we need more storage. Exactly. You know, again, your renewables create this inconsistent energy, and so you have to build in the cost of storage with the cost of renewables. You can't separate those, and again, it's just not the way to go.
All right, we have a little over 1 minute left. So here's a question that you can answer very, very concisely, and will have to. It goes to the heart of election integrity. Who won the 2020 presidential election? Joe Biden or Donald Trump? Bobby Charles.
Look, I'm a constitutionalist. There's no going back in history. Joe Biden, but I do
Short,
want to
that's
say
it. David Jones.
Biden.
Joe Biden was sworn in as president in 2021.
Unfortunately, Biden.
Biden?
Robert Wessels.
The reality is we need election integrity so we can answer the questions like that going forward.
Questions like that are important, you said?
I said we need election integrity so we can answer questions like that going forward with a strong answer.
Jonathan Bush.
I don't know why you decided to make us all so sad on the last question. Yeah, Biden won, but we'd like to fix that anytime soon.
All right. Well, you can begin the party now because this debate is now down to its final seconds. We'd like to thank you all for participating. We appreciate it. We hope that you've illuminated voters and that they participate in their right to vote on June 9th in the primary. Thank you all again. We appreciate it. Our thanks as well to the Maine State Chamber of Commerce for being our partners here. Been a big benefit to us, and we are grateful for that.
And tomorrow night we'll have a debate the same channel and on our streaming channel with the 5 Democratic candidates who are running for governor also on the June 9th primary ballot. And early voting is underway if you care to do that at your town hall or by absentee ballot by mail.
If you'd like more information on this election, you'll find a lot more at newscentermaine.com or on our News Center Maine streaming app. Thanks for being with us this evening. We hope to see you tomorrow night for the Democratic gubernatorial debate.
Thanks for watching and good night.
How much I let the fear take the wheel and steer.